time for the internet's favorite pastime, revisionism.
Parkour Civilization, despite being many months old now, has recently become a wildly popular phenomenon in the Minecraft community. What on the surface seems like your average Minecraft video, many claim to actually be a deeply thematic critique of capitalism and classism. But is it truly the cinematic masterpiece many build it up to be? In this video, I will analyze this Minecraft movie and find out whether or not it actually is as good as people say. So, even though this isn't going to be a video on my second channel, I'm still going to treat it as one. Roll it! Hello and welcome and hello to Mypowerbob Talks Films. This is a very special episode, and up top I gotta warn you that I will spoil Parkour Civilization. So if you haven't seen it yet, you should go and do that. I'm also not going to retell you the story, so if you haven't seen it yet, you'll possibly be a bit lost and confused. Now, I wish I wouldn't have to state this, but I feel like it is required. Please watch the whole video before commenting. I am going to give some harsh criticisms throughout this video, but reserve your typing for the end. And lastly, I am not going to touch on the sequel, Parkour Civilization 2. Now, the movie has many good elements to it, but there are also some notable bad ones. So let's ease right into it, starting with the surface level of the whole thing. When you first start watching, you'll quickly realize that this feels like those type of quickly paced Minecraft videos designed to keep the attention of a younger audience. What some would call slop content, although I feel that's a bit too harsh. Many people, in their attempt to get doubtful people to watch the movie, claim that this slop nature is an intentional satirical take on that side of YouTube, and I just don't agree. The movie makes no commentary on it, it doesn't break the style down or expand it into something more. Whether you like it or not, the movie is pretty straightforward with the style of video it chooses to be. I think people are instead confused because the way it partakes in style is very light, so it seems like satire if you don't think about it. But it's also definitely not to the point of it being bad, just a little bit less desirable. I am going to get more into certain elements of this style later on. The plot of this movie is pretty clear and understandable. It can easily be summarized as Ebo wants to climb the ranks of society and live comfortably. A very relatable motivation, honestly. Now, this is not a bad thing at all. Having a clear and straightforward plot is a key part in keeping your audience. They gotta understand what's going on, after all. These simplified summaries, which technically are called loglines, can easily be done for many good movies. Dinosaurs break out of their zoo cages, an innocent man navigates prison life. Well, go ahead. Take a wild guess. It's a classic tale of an underdog climbing the social ladder, similar to movies like The Wolf of Wall Street and Kung Fu Panda. But when talking of classic tales, it doesn't get more classic than The Hero's Journey, coined in 1949 by Joseph Campbell in his book The Hero with 1,000 Faces. The monomyth, which we now call The Hero's Journey, is a cycle of a narrative that many religious and mythological stories can be categorized and compared to. It was later adopted as a sort of template or blueprint to make a good story, and it's commonly accepted that the best pop culture example of this is A New Hope, which follows the steps of the hero's journey to a T.
You know, I think my last mentor probably was Joe Campbell, who asked a lot of the interesting questions and exposed me to a lot of things that made me very interested in a lot more of the cosmic questions and the mystery.
But what are the steps of the hero's journey? Well, it's broken into 3 separate parts, 3 acts as many call them, and in those acts you find a total of 17 steps. Now, 17 is a lot, which is why it was refined into 12 steps in 2007 by Christopher Vogler, in a form of a company memo. This is intended to be used as a quick and easy introduction to writing. But it's more recognizable in the form of a wheel. This is from the Wikipedia page on the hero's journey, but it comes in many forms with many different formulations of each step, and sometimes different amounts of steps. And the reason people have these different views on what the hero's journey exactly contains is because the whole thing is bad. The formula is not a concrete guide to automatically make a good narrative. Joseph Campbell himself admits that not every story contains all 17 of his steps, and not all stories follow these steps in the same order. The monomyth has, in a manner of speaking, been debunked.
Dude, you gotta turn on the news. No, it doesn't matter what channel, the hero's journey has been cancelled.
It has been criticized for being inaccurate, biased, and to a certain degree, even harmful to the development of narrative storytelling. I should know, when I was getting my bachelor's degree in filmmaking, I wanted to write it on a hero's journey, but my professor refused to let me do so because of these negative aspects of it and lack of academic standing. So why am I bringing this up at all? Well, just like everything else, this topic isn't completely black and white. You can acknowledge that the hero's journey has its flaws, and yet still use it as inspiration for the structure of your story. It can even be used for its opposite intention, to indicate when your story is becoming worse. So, this is how the hero's journey fits into Parkour Civilization. I'll try not to make it confusing, but I will be ping-ponging back and forth from Wagler and Campbell's lists. The ordinary world is hard to define since Ebo already lives in a Parkour Civilization, but given that the noob level is all he knows, we can define that as his ordinary world, and every other level of the civilization as the unknown or magical realms. However, the ordinary world is supposed to be a safe one, and the noob level is anything but safe. There's oppression, poverty, and dangers ever present. The call to adventure is present in the form of the ticket event, but after that there isn't really any refusal of the call, just a reluctance to it before committing anyway. One could argue that the beef jump is the call to adventure and the chicken is the refusal, but that would be getting into nitpicky territory. From Campbell's list, one could argue that the supernatural aid is a bribe to reduce one of the 2-block jumps to a single block jump. Back on Wagler's list, there's no meeting of the mentor at all, it just goes straight into crossing the first threshold, and what a magnificent crossing that was. I genuinely didn't see this coming, and was definitely what got me, and probably many others, invested in where this story could be going. A very good twist. Belly of the Whale is of course the prison. This is a minor setback of the story where the hero's skills are put to the test to prove that they have means to succeed in their adventure. In this case, the test of course is the—
I bet you're trying to think of a plan to escape, right?
What?
Oh no. Suddenly, out of nowhere and for no reason at all, someone shows up and just helps Ebo out of the prison. A total plot convenience. It's like they didn't know how to make the prison sequence interesting, so they course-corrected out of the hole they dug simply because Ebo is the main character? He's handed a solution on a silver platter. This is not how you write a story. The world and its inhabitants should not move heaven and earth and break their established roles just to abide by the main character's needs, even if it comes at a price in the end. This isn't Ebo fighting his way out of the belly of the whale. This is the whale barely even swallowing before spitting him out and going, "Sorry for that." This is a filmmaking sin. You're going to hell. And for those of you watching with a very specific term in mind for what this is, I am saving that for the Cardinal Sin that happens later. Once back on the noob level, we get the meeting of the mentor after all, which means we're still in Act 1. The hero's journey doesn't continue, it repeats, with a new call to adventure, a new belly of the beast, and a new supernatural aid.
Sharks! Thanks. I'm here today to present to you with a new and improved monomyth. I give you the hero's journey. This little lump here is a prelude. It's where we're going to do an additional round of the first act, prolonging our movie and making us even more money, cash, bob dollars, dough, flour, eggs. Bake in the oven, 1000 degrees for 5 seconds. We eat it. Straight to the hospital. When the hospital bills come, ladies and gentlemen, we have the means to pay for them.
Wow. One could argue that this is where the second act begins, but I'd argue otherwise, simply because the hero hasn't left his known world and crossed over to the actual unknown world. This is not how you subvert the hero's journey, this is how you stagnate it. We've already been here, we've seen the daily cycle of the noob level, we've seen the trials and challenges of it, let's move on. Either you start the movie from the wood houses, or you go straight from the prison to trying to climb to the pro level. Now we reach the big main threshold to cross, with the climb up to the pro level. And I gotta admit, there is a little bit of tension here. With the help of the supernatural aid, we finally cross over to the unknown world of Act 2. The road of trials and tests, allies and enemies account for more or less the entirety of the pro level. Tests are, of course, navigating life on this level, working, parkour training, and the parkour battle. His ally is his neighbor, and his enemies are the parkour master and the suspicious folks trying to prevent him from leveling up. I also just got to mention here and now, the animal parkour part was hilarious. I had to pause and replay this scene a few times because it was just so funny. Anyway, the meeting of the goddess is a moment in the story where the hero is rewarded for his trials by receiving a gift from a powerful figure. This is the moment in Fellowship of the Rings where Galadriel gives gifts to the Fellowship to aid them on their journey. And it's the moment in Parkour Civilization where the parkour master gives Ebo the Totem of Undying. It takes some more meandering, but eventually we get to approaching the innermost cave, or in this case, climbing the social ladder to the master level. This is often intended to be around the middle of the story, maybe towards the third act of it. And it's pretty accurate, we are 50 minutes into the movie. The movie then sorta heads straight for the apotheosis. This is where the hero comes to a grand understanding of something, which readies them to continue the journey. This comes in the form of the impossible parkour jump. More specifically, the barrier block. And I absolutely loved this. I physically, literally pogged when this happened. In my opinion, this is the best moment of the movie, and it does everything right. It's a good moment of tension, it's a good cliffhanger moment with a recap, even though the recaps are not welcome in this movie. I'm getting into that later. The barrier block isn't even a plot convenience or an ass pull, as someone might call it, because the barrier block has already been established as both existing and a key part in parkour. So this is fantastically done, standing ovation worthy. The ordeal presents itself in the form of the full parkour level up challenge, as well as the battle with the suspicious guy. This stage of the journey involves a death and rebirth, and while it isn't as serious as dying, you could argue that leveling up is a form of rebirth. Reward is a result of the rebirth, by the way. The comparative point on Campbell's list here would be the ultimate boon, however, there are points to this step that differ slightly. Mainly that the ultimate boon in relation to this movie would be the diamond boots of the parkour champion, but those haven't even made an appearance yet, because Ebo has only reached the gold level, where he goes through the second act of the hero's journey all over again.
It's the hero's journey.
Wow.
New trials. New allies, new enemies, new gift from the goddess, although this is another example of the no plot convenience, and a new innermost cave. However, the story does also step into some points that wasn't covered in the previous round of Act 2, namely Atonement with the Father. This is the point where Ebo meets Seawatts and discovers the true context of Parkour Civilization and his memories. Atonement with the Father is the point where the hero confronts a being of great power that relates to themselves in some sort of way. A moment with the intention of leading to self-reflection and an understanding of the actions of those that oppose the hero. It's a hurdle the hero must overcome in order to progress to the climax of the story, sometimes by defeating the father and sometimes by saving the father. In the case of Parkour Civilization, the atonement is chopped up in parts and spread throughout most of the rest of the movie. After that, the journey bleeds into a new ordeal with the Parkour Championship, complete with the death and eventual rebirth. This scene contains the Cardinal Sin of the movie, but I'm still not going to talk about that yet. Just know that this is technically the start of the reward step, where he gets the means to still triumph, as well as discover how the world changed as a result of his death. Apotheosis is reached once again once Ebo reaches the master level and interrogates Siwat. We're getting into the third act of the journey, and this is where Parkour Civilization strays the most from the model. The road back is sorta Evo's return to the arena, and once he wins the battle against the champion, we step into both the ultimate boon from Act 2 of Campbell's model, as well as the resurrection in Act 3 of Wagler's model. The two models get quite different at this point as well, where Wagler simply states that the third act requires the hero to acknowledge their impact on the world, as well as how the journey has changed them as they return home or reach their final destination. Campbell suggests something closer towards the world and the journey having impacted the hero to the point that they've changed profusely or would otherwise question ever returning home. At this point, a companion may come in to save our hero or lead them into a final self-reflection of who they should choose to be. Parkour Civilization finds itself somewhere undecidedly in the middle of this, but also being reluctant to even truly explore the final steps of Campbell's model. There is no magic flight and no rescue from without. There are hints of crossing of the return thresholds, master of two worlds, and freedom to live, but we don't really get a full resolution with these guidelines because the movie ends abruptly. The Diamond Boots is the elixir from Wagler's model that Evo returns with to improve the world, yet he refuses them. Now, this isn't directly stated to fit into any of the steps, however, I believe it is the better option than what one can extract from this blueprint. Remember that I said no story should follow the hero's journey to the letter. Him refusing the power and giving it to the old man shows a real strength of character and perhaps the driving quality that led him to ultimately succeed in his quest. The old man refuses, of course, and Evo takes him on as an advisor instead, promising that life will become better for the citizens. Parkour Civilization strikes most of the points you can find on both versions of the hero's journey, and while most of the points struck doesn't automatically disqualify the movie as genuine or a good story, its infatuation with repeating the two first acts completely is a serious failing of the one-block jump, to put it into a relatable term. There is an idea in storytelling that 3 and 7 are magical numbers. 7 dwarves, 3 pieces of Triforce, 7-11, 3 acts of a story. Now, the 3 acts thing isn't just from the hero's journey, it's a structuring device that is the industry standard for everything. Movies, books, games, even music. Everything has a beginning, middle, and end, except for Half-Life. Now, I get that it is tempting to structure Parkour Civilization like it is, given the different materials of boots, but I think it does the story more harm than good, as it sorta overstays its welcome. That's why I did this long explanation of how the movie fits into almost every step on the list, to highlight the odd structuring of the story. Yes, a story doesn't need to follow the hero's journey to be good, and yes, that is the biggest criticism against it as a valid analyzing tool, but I'd argue that by accident, Parkour Civilization actually over-relies on the hero's journey, which is how it ends up with 2 first acts and 2 second acts. A movie structured like this shouldn't work, and yet, I watched the whole thing more than once. Why is that? If I found so many issues with the movie, how come I got so invested in it several times? The world building and its invitation for you to get immersed in it is absolutely, insanely fantastic. It almost barely makes sense. The concept is ridiculous. The foundations of the society are nonsensical. The behaviors of the characters are ludicrous. And yet, it enthralls you because the movie commits to its world 110%. Take the parkour tricks Evo performs as an example. The 360 and backwards jumps seem so obvious as tricks, so expectedly common among the more professional citizens that when he first pulls them off, you wonder why it is a big deal. But then, as the movie goes on and more people are caught off guard and surprised to see such innovative parkour, you really start to get a clearer understanding of how the society works and how educated the citizens are. It shows how innovation is not taught, how the citizens are being kept from becoming stronger. It also makes it clear eventually as to why Evo is expected to save them all, because he has a natural underlying skill and creativity to his approach. You also slowly gain an understanding of how the civilization functions as an almost well-oiled machine. Animals are expected to parkour to show they are healthy and fit to eat, and those who fall down are of lower quality and thus only fit to be eaten by the noobs. The noobs are, of course, incentivized by the illusion of progress to jump for the beef, and when they expectedly fall down into the prison, they are used for free labor. With parkour as a center point of the society, it's also expected of you to do as much and as flashy parkour as possible the higher your status is. And if you choose to take the easy, safe routes, you are deserving of ridicule because, come on, you're a parkour master after all. The world building is so good because every single actor in this movie plays their roles so straight to the point that you can easily look past the nonsensical parts of it, completely forget it even. The backstory of the world is also pretty interesting. We don't get much information about it. Ebo himself states that he's confused as to how the world came to be.
No one really remembers how Parkour Civilization started.
But this is not a negative in the slightest. These past years, there's been an immense growth in the desire for information. People want to know more and more about characters and worlds, to the point that studios have started to over-explain everything, leaving nothing to the imagination. Disney, as a whole, has started to face backlash for this with the way they try to progress the worlds of Marvel and Star Wars. This, however, is not something a story should dwell too much on, and Parkour Civilization handles this beautifully. The world just exists as it does, and it does not owe us an explanation as to why it does. Many famous pieces of media take place in odd worlds that never spend time on explaining why the worlds are the way they are, because knowing too much would ruin the magic of it. The human mind is strong and can in many cases be more creative in filling in gaps than a writer will be able to convey. The Force from Star Wars is a good example of this. It was a magical power that was clearly understood as a mysterious element that had clear rules and function.
It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
And it worked fantastically like that. But when the Force was later explained deeper with the introduction of the midichlorians...
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells. And we are symbionts with them.
Symbionts?
Life forms living together for mutual advantage. Without the midichlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force.
Many fans hated it because it removed the wonder and mystery of the Force. There were no gaps to fill in anymore, and by doing so, George Lucas removed a little bit of the viewer's ability to sort of interact with the world. Parkour Civilization does not have this issue. It leaves us with a lot of empty gaps we can fill in with our own imagination. The only other hint we have is the supposed flashback we later learn is a total fabrication. The foreshadowing in this scene is really good as well. The almost empty inventory, even though Ebo was supposedly just mining, the nonsensical nature of how parkour became monetizable, and who could miss the obvious fake house that is only a front wall. The movie actually has a lot of good foreshadowing. The rude pro that falls after building Ebo the slime block jump, the old man falling down to the prison level, and the existence of a parkour god.
There must be a parkour god looking out for me. Okay, back to the secret mission.
It shows that the story was actually planned out pretty decently. I would say the immersion is 100%. However, there is one annoying issue. The recapping. Parkour Civilization is not a movie.
Then what am I even here for?
Parkour Civilization is a series of episodes that was stitched together for a movie. Now, for the case of an episodic pacing, it is completely valid to include recaps of earlier events in the story. In a movie, however, this is not necessary, and is in fact antithetical to the format of a movie. Parkour Civilization has a lot of these recaps. That is yet another sin for the counter, you're going to super hell. Now, I understand that the idea of a Minecraft movie on YouTube is that you take an entire series and release it as one long video. However, it is not illegal to edit out these recaps. In fact, it is wanted. There is a very important rule in storytelling about not treating your audience as idiots. They are capable of more than you expect. And keeping constant recaps in your movie is treating your audience as idiots. It's snapping your fingers in the face saying, Hey, are you following? Did you get what just happened? I'm gonna tell you anyway. And listen, I get that you'd want your video to be around the 2-hour mark to really sell the feature-length feeling of it. However, I can't imagine cutting out these recaps would remove more than 30 minutes of it. It's nothing more than 1/4 of the whole thing. But then again, it's also a whole 1/4 of your movie being wasted time. It's the kind of thing that could easily chase away your viewer. By the third recap, they'll get tired of these pauses in the story and leave, which is not good for your algorithm. Recaps can work, yes, but usually when they are done in movies, it's for the purpose of revealing new information or a different perspective on what happened. The Last Duel is a movie just showing a sequence of events 3 whole times, but each time it's done through the perspective of a different character. This doesn't do that. This is just fat you can cut off. And speaking of things you can cut off, in the year 1982, a movie was released by the title of Blade Runner. Barely a box office success, the movie became a cult film that went on to become one of the most important inspirations to the genre of cyberpunk. But if you ever ask a Blade Runner fan today whether you should watch the movie, you will most likely get a definitive no. That is, if you're talking about the theatrical 1982 version. There's actually 7 different versions of this movie, and it's commonly agreed upon that the definitive version to watch is the latest one, the 2007 Final Cut version. But why is it that you shouldn't watch it as it originally came? Well, the Final Cut version has a unicorn, while the original 82 version has a serious case of eek, it's narration!
I know, right?
Narration is a literary device often associated with old film noir, where a detective would tell the viewer about their inner thoughts. It is a trope that is very hard to handle, and it often ends up with a bad result. If you compare the 2007 version of Blade Runner,
in the old-world colony, the chance to begin again in a golden land of opportunity and adventure.
to the theatrical release,
they don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession. Ex-cop, ex-Blade Runner, ex-killer.
you realize that it is trading a lot of the immersion and mood for exposition that explains the scene to you like you're a kid. The problem with narration is that it is often used to fill empty space due to fear of the viewer growing bored or confused. And when a movie first starts to use narration, the filmmakers feel the pressure to keep it throughout the whole thing. There are ways to make narration work, however, most easily done through the trope of unreliable narrator. This is a type of narration where it slowly is made evident that the person narrating is biased and is twisting the truth of events to favor him or to give you a warped view of what really happened. Movies like Fight Club and The Sixth Sense are built from the ground up around this premise, hence the narrator being unreliable. In Parkour Civilization, we get hit with Ebo's narration immediately.
Here in Parkour Civilization, no one chooses to jump for the beef.
At first, this is a good thing because it gives us necessary exposition about the world and how it works, as well as how it supposedly started. But it soon overstays its welcome. The essence of Blade Runner's theatrical release vibrates through Ebo as he fills every possible moment with his narration regarding what's going on. It's as if he's afraid that what's happening on the screen is not obvious to the viewers. We are once again returning to the problem of treating your audience like idiots. Now, I should clarify, I'm not saying that Ebo believes his viewers are dumb. It is merely an expression to represent a possible insecurity a creator has in the delivery of their work. Exposition is when information of something is delivered in large amounts and in great detail. It's an info dump. Exposition is sometimes necessary in a movie to get the viewer on board with the story, but it's also a slippery slope that can lead to over-explaining ideas and dragging out the scene. So while the start of Parkour Civilization delivers a good bit of exposition, the further we get into the movie, the less we have a need for it. The best form of exposition delivery is when a main character is uninformed about something, so that when the character receives that information, it is also given to the viewer at the same time.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic.
This makes it feel natural. In the movie, Ebo ends up in several situations where the exposition could have been delivered naturally to him. But instead, he decides to skip to the aftermath of those events and then have him infodump it all to us through his narration. This is a tiring way of showing what happened, as it makes it feel less like a story playing out in front of our eyes and more like your friend retelling you what he was up to during his vacation to Parkour Civilization. I'd much rather have listened to his neighbor explain what the parkour statues were all about. I'd much rather see what happened to Ebo in real time when he fell down to the prison level, instead of skipping right to him being in a jail cell. Even then, give us time to breathe. The constant narration gets in the way of several possible moments where you are able to really feel the tension of this place, to feel the emotion and the weight of the task Ebo has been given. But we don't get that. And to be honest, you can't really blame Ebo either. It is no secret that the YouTube algorithm is holding YouTubers hostage. Watch time reigns supreme, and if too many people click off your video too fast, then your whole channel can be doomed. It is also no secret that the attention span of the average human is decreasing, or so they say. The feeling that if you aren't entertained by the first 5 seconds, then the content isn't worth your time. So naturally, the feeling that you have to constantly keep your viewers' attention can eat away at your creative process, ending with an overuse of narration and exposition. Is the reason these brain rot videos, as people call them, are indeed brain rot. It confirms the idea that you need to be fed information every second. But it's also the reason as to why people say Parkour Civilization is a satire of those videos. You can feel that there is a desire to tell a good story with some depth to it, but it's held back by the idea that the series needs to be attractive to as many types of viewers as possible. It's why I feel that the brain rot elements of the movie are, at most, very light in nature. So, for as many issues as I think the movie has, I don't think the entirety of the blame can be put on Ebo and his team.
You know, it always comes back to that age-old quote. We partake in a community. The jester, baby.
Speaking of partaking in a community, I don't know, I have no idea how to segue into the next part, but it's about the look of the civilization. Gareth Edwards is a filmmaker known for movies such as Godzilla 2014, Rogue One, and The Creator. And what both these movies and Gareth Edwards often get praise for is his skill in giving the viewer a sense of the scale of something. Whether it is the King of the Monsters, the Death Star, or the USS Nomad, the sense of how incomprehensibly large these things are is not lost on the viewer. By placing the view on the ground next to the main characters, the viewers can easily immerse themselves in the situation and feel the emotion the characters are feeling. Parkour Civilization handles this perfectly, whether it is through the POV of Ebo or the more third-person framings. The immense size and vastness of the world is clear. The Parkour Temple is a phenomenal set piece that really makes you feel small no matter which version you stare at, even with a full dirt roof over it. The parkour statues, the master-level skyscrapers, the many hanging jail cells, and the large, empty arena, Parkour Civilization is constructed specifically to make the individual feel as small as possible, to make them feel insignificant, ultimately demoralizing them to a degree as to not rise up against those in power. It utilizes the architectural style of brutalism, which puts focus on large structures that doesn't hide anything behind decor and detail. It's the style that most dystopian worlds take inspiration from, and some people might associate with the depressing urban areas of Eastern European countries. So, if the Parkour Temple was ever more detailed than just using a variety of blocks in its flat walls, then it wouldn't have been as effective as a set piece. The Parkour Temple has quickly become iconic. However, it is only in second place, just behind the new Minecraft icon. Ebo, you got a golden goose in your hands. As a filmmaker, making a memorable and impactful scene is hard. A lot of work and planning needs to be put in. What is next to impossible, however, is creating a scene or plot device that transcends its origin to become cemented in cultural knowledge, something that is by all means iconic. In pop culture, we recognize things like lightsabers, the rolling boulder, Super Saiyans, a time-traveling DeLorean, the Western standoff, and the Akira slide. These are iconic moments and objects that have become so popular that people have heard of them without ever seeing their media of origin, and in many cases, without ever knowing about the media of origin at all. This is what's known as cultural osmosis, the idea that you can know of a trope without realizing you never saw the trope's origin. In the Minecraft community, we have things like Creeper, Aw-Man, Diggy Diggy Hole, and Herobrine. And now, alongside those icons, we can also place the jump for the chicken or the beef. It's such a simple picture, and yet it conveys so much about the world. It's no wonder this scene immediately became iconic, already lending itself to various parodies across the YouTube space.
Here, in Horse-Killing Civilization, no one chooses the wood axe.
So this will forever be a part of Minecraft history and its community. Okay, that's that segment done. Anything else I need to mention before the next chapter? I guess I could mention the
sound design! There aren't many custom sounds in the movie, so I'm going to boil it down to Vine Boom Bad, Guitar Riff Thing Good.
Now, what isn't going to be boiled down, and I'm instead going to feed you raw, is the themes and morals. As mentioned earlier, there is evidence of deeper themes and morals in the movie, which is where most of its praise is born from. So let's get straight into the big one. Classism is a form of societal discrimination based on the social class. The idea that your wealth, living situation, family heritage, or even simple misfortune could and should define where you belong and what role you are supposed to play in society. The Hunger Games franchise is a good example of this. Katniss is born in District 12, and therefore she must work in the coal mines on an empty stomach so that the citizens of the capital can eat till they're full, then deliberately throw it all up so they can feast on more.
What's this?
It's for when you're full. It makes you sick, so you can go on eating.
How else could you taste everything?
Class divides are often represented as a pyramid. The lone almighty ruler is at the very top, and as you go further down the pyramid, you find more and more people with less and less agency over their life. Parkour Civilization presents a quite literal form of this with the vertical placements of each divided class, which is not uncommon to find in stories criticizing classism, works such as Metropolis or High Rise. Twitter user Scarf made a version of this that places each class of Parkour Civilization and how they serve society on the pyramid. Along with that, they wrote a thread about the societal structure. It's a pretty insightful read that highlights what most people's takeaway regarding the movie is, and that will be linked below. However, I would argue that the movie does a rather poor job in the criticism department, and is at most a shallow commentary on it. Yes, it contains obvious points, such as the idea that no person should be able to move up a class and should be prevented from doing so by any means necessary, which results in things like the final jump of the noob level parkour temple to require a barrier block in order to actually rank up, or that the prisoners are allowed to live free among the poor, but with the caveat that they are no longer allowed to even attempt ranking up due to them being confirmed as dangerous individuals. But these observations are just surface level. It's the basic understanding of the problems of classism that everyone will understand immediately. Yes, you got enforcers of the divide, propaganda about being fortunate for being a pro as long as you do your jobs, and the idea that becoming a ruler is impossible because you ordinary folk literally can't reach the top of the tower. But there is no solution here. There are no aspirations to fix this societal structure. When Ebo defeats the champion, he takes the crown and gives it to the old man. When the old man says no, Ebo picks up the crown and basically goes, "Alright, then I shall rule these lands," instead of going, "Then we shall all rule our land." He promises to fix the hurdles that opposed him to make them fair, instead of removing the hurdles at all. The noob level will still be noobs, the pros will still answer to the masters, and animals still have to parkour to ensure their equality. This is also evident in the fact that, except for the old man, we don't know what happened to Ebo's allies in the end, those who were integral to helping him along the way. Is the helpful neighbor still stuck on the pro level, having to work every day lest a master bucket clutch down to battle him? The movie's only real comment on classism is, "Boy, living here is quite bad. Glad I don't have to do that anymore." It's a very selfish way of criticizing classism. Another theme I've seen people bring up is the criticism of capitalism. Now, while I don't think that was completely Ebo's intention either, I do believe this holds some merit purely from the fact that capitalism is a much more common topic of discussion on the internet. Parkour is a currency in Parkour Civilization, effectively making it money civilization, which sort of reflects modern capitalist societies like America. Bigger and better jumps equals bigger and better dollar bills. However, this idea falls apart when you start thinking about it. Ebo says so himself in a video.
I'm not really sure why or how parkour works as a currency,
which is why some people have come forth with the idea that parkour isn't a currency, it's entertainment. This is mentioned in Scarf's classism thread as well, and I think this is a pretty interesting interpretation of it. The further up you go in a class system, the less parkour you have to do for the entertainment of others, mostly because those who demand to be entertained are from a higher class than you. In my theory, this is because parkour for entertainment is embarrassing. Parkour for entertainment is an act of humiliation. Haha, you have to parkour to survive instead of because you want to. This is shown in how much parkour is demanded of you throughout the levels. At the master level, it's only for housing and food, which are necessities, but only when you yourself choose to do so. At the pro level, it's for working to survive, giving away your time and labor in order to afford to live. At the noob level, you are forced to do it daily in front of a higher ranking person. You dare live here near us, so we're going to have to punish you for it. It's the idea that a rich person only have to pay a small sum for the food they eat, while a poor person won't be able to afford food, and thus are served a much more expensive medical bill when they get sick. This all culminated at the prison level, where the prisoners must perform parkour every 30 seconds. Dance like a monkey for the reward of nothing. You're made out to be a jester, a fool. Now, this all falls apart because it's merely questioned. We gotta give parkour to survive? Ain't that odd? And then the story moves on. It doesn't try to combat this, the only other alternative it offers is blocks as a currency, but this also falls apart for the same reason. It is never the story or Ebo's goal to villainize or change this system, merely to make you aware that it exists and is not ideal. Which is a good starting point, but not a solution. Now, it is starting to sound like I'm being quite a hater, however, I don't think that matters. In the end, I think one can safely assume that it wasn't really Ebo's intention to make any serious commentary on any societal structure, and that any supposed criticism is just us, the viewer, associating a story with something bigger. Therefore, any missteps in its commentary can be excused and excluded from any final opinion of the film, simply because it's a Minecraft video on YouTube and it shouldn't be taken as serious. I'm not saying that a Minecraft video on YouTube can't contain any serious commentary or deeper meanings, but it's made with the intention of pure entertainment first and foremost. And I was very entertained. But the way we interact with art is completely subjective. Just because it likely wasn't intended doesn't mean we shouldn't or can't see deeper meanings in it. That's why we're sitting here, discussing the thematics of Parkour Civilization. The only thing that matters is how you experience the art, and many people experience a criticism of classism in it, a completely valid interpretation. There is a user on Twitter by the name of Arlo who brings forth the idea that the movie can be read as an allegory for trans people and transitioning, and it does make sense. Even when it wasn't the intention at all, it's a good representation of how art transcends the creator's intention and invites people to interact with it in their own ways. I'm going to be linking that thread down in the description as well. Now, there is one thing the movie does that I think is pretty good. For all the ideas people have of this movie being deep, complicated and advanced, I think many people forget to look at the more obvious moral of the story that is presented, to never give up on your dreams. Ebo has one simple dream, to rank up and gain respect.
Hold on. Yellow hair, wears a headband, does parkour, and wants to earn respect by rising up in rank. Oh my parkour god, Ebo is Naruto!
If there's one definitive trait Ebo has, it is that he never gives up. He faces obstacles, setbacks, and opposition, but Ebo never gives up on his mission. Yes, sometimes he receives handouts that might be undeserved, but you can choose to twist those events into metaphors for the minor rewards of hard work. Ebo also makes friends and allies and accepts those people's offer to help him along the way. Looking past the other issues presented with the themes and Ebo's character, he is overall a quite solid role model, as his hard work and positive attitude ends up paying off, and the moral culminates in his final sentence.
Parkour was never about making or failing a jump. It was about getting up and trying again. The parkour god told me as long as you can parkour, there is always a way. And in my Parkour Civilization, people will always have a chance to try again.
So, in the end, the movie does have some positive things to take away from it. I personally believe that the message of working hard and never giving up is the most important moral you can instill on someone, and I'll always be grateful to those kinds of stories. With all that being said, it is time to talk about the big, ugly elephant in the room, the Cardinal Sin. During the times of ancient Greece, there were no movies or TV shows to watch, not even a single YouTube video. So sad. So whenever the Greeks wanted entertainment, they would have to go to the theater. But back then, the nuances and techniques of storytelling weren't as developed as they are in the modern age. There were only two genres in existence at this point. Comedy, which meant the story was light-hearted and would have a happy ending, and tragedy, which meant the story was dramatic with a darker ending. Now, while there weren't many tropes in existence yet, there were still some. And the most popular one to come out of this age is what is known as a Deus Ex Machina. This is when a story had been written into a corner, so the playwrights decided to introduce a god to the story who would come in and solve whatever issue the characters were facing. These god characters would often enter the stage either by crane or by an elevator. And Deus Ex Machina translates roughly to God Machine. Now, this is a big no-no in storytelling. It might in fact be the biggest no-no possible, hence why I refer to it as the Cardinal Sin. This trope has faced a lot of justified criticism for being a clear indicator that the writers are not able to handle the complicated story they have crafted. These criticisms trace all the way back to the ancient Greek times even, and yet it still appears every now and then. Shakespeare used it in several of his plays, but even closer to modern day, we find moments like in Return of the King when Frodo and Sam is saved by the Eagles, or in Avengers Endgame when Captain Marvel appears suddenly to take out Thanos' ship. In the case of Parkour Civilization, the God Machine presents itself almost as literally as possible, where the Parkour God appears suddenly to fix the issue of Ebo having lost the Parkour Championship by giving him a pair of champion boots. This is a very odd moment in the story as it simply doesn't need to happen. Throughout the movie, Ebo has collected a certain amount of skill and knowledge of the world to the point that even if the story threw him down to the noob level, he would know exactly what to do to reach the master level and challenge the champion again. This scene with the Parkour God simply doesn't need to exist. But Ebo chose to include it, committing the Cardinal Sin along the way. Therefore, you're now going to super duper hell. If there was only one thing I could have changed about this story, it is this moment. But given that I am an egotistical, opinionated, and slimy human being who is hungry for YouTube fame, I am going to give a full list of how I would change the story. To start off, I would remove the vine booms, every single one. They add nothing and are more a distraction than a highlight of the moments they boom for. Number 2. Remove most of the narration, except for the one at the start and the one at the end. Replace those narration moments of exposition dumping with either moments where Ebo experiences something for the first time, or with conversations with another player. Ebo is allowed to talk loudly to himself, but those have to be in the moment, not in the form of narrating over the moment. Number 3. Remove all the recaps. They only feel like expository as-you-knows, where something is explained to us that we already know. It works in the episodes, but not in the movie. Number 4. Shorten the story so that the first 2 act structures aren't repeated. For example, have Ebo meet the old man in the jail and have him help Ebo escape. Ebo can then immediately attempt to climb the parkour temple again. Also, combine the pro and master levels somehow, both the layout and the stories that happen on them. This would require more restructuring than I care to write, but I think it can be done. Number 5. Remove the Deus Ex Machina. As I already explained, you can easily just remove this scene and any scene related to the diamond boots and still have the story make sense. Make Ebo triumph through his own skill and knowledge, not because of handouts from a being that could easily solve the problem just by evaporating the champion instead. And number 6. Defeat the present classism by restructuring the world. As an example, have the noob level become the safe level where everyone can live comfortably, complete with cooked food and houses of any size they want. And then have the pro and master levels be open to those who want a more challenging life, similar to how some people in real life choose to live alone in a forest without electricity and only an outhouse to go number 1, 2 and a secret 3rd thing in. To get serious for a moment. As good as this movie is, it isn't a masterpiece. And I don't believe we should call it that. I believe statements like, best video ever, nothing can top this, and it's a masterpiece are ultimately harmful for everyone involved. For the viewer, it creates a false illusion about what is the right and wrong things to do with a story, which leads them down a pinhole of replication instead of innovation. People think this is good, therefore I must make something like it. It can also create a warped image of how they should review a story, where they compare something to something it shouldn't be compared to. And for the creator, it is equally as harmful because they gain a confirmation bias towards what they believe people want to see. So when they create something new, something different, and it doesn't get as good or even as much reception as the masterpiece, then they get demoralized, which either leads to them creating content they don't enjoy or simply giving up. For as much as a compliment it would be for someone to call something I've made a masterpiece, I don't wish for that to ever happen. Because the idea of everything I create being compared, both by me and my viewers, to this masterpiece would ingrain itself like a poisonous stinger in my brain and remain ever present as I try to keep creating new things. My favorite video I've made so far, Mypowerbob versus the people, has some issues. It drags out too long, for example. And my most popular video ever, Good Friends May Part, has a ton of problems, namely a sudden plot convenience and a very abrupt ending, which is why I made a sequel. And that makes me wonder how Parkour Civilization 2 handles these problems. Even what scholars believe is the greatest movie ever made, a masterpiece of sorts, Citizen Kane, has an official negative review. Now, this is all subjective, of course. I'm not going to force anyone to use the word masterpiece like I want, and I'm not going to berate anyone for using it either. It's a subjective opinion after all, and people are allowed to have different opinions. So, in conclusion, Parkour Civilization is not a masterpiece, but it is nevertheless a good, and dare I even say, maybe a required watch. Also, something Parkour Civilization. So that is my analysis of Parkour Civilization. If you enjoy my personality, then consider subscribing to see more of me. But if you enjoyed this style of video, then consider subscribing to my second channel where I actually make these kinds of videos. There aren't that many there right now, but if I do get a bit more support, it will likely motivate me to create more videos there. Also, if you want me to analyze Parkour Civilization 2 as well, then tell me down in the comments. And if you disagree with anything I said, then I really want you to tell me in a comment. Disagreements are how we grow and learn after all. So I hope you decide to return to watch another video of mine, whether it's here or on the other channel. But until then, thank you and good night and thank you.